debt is not a bad thing. Otherwise, people wouldn't take on it.
You have to say, okay, debt is bad. Let's get rid of all these credit cards.
Debt came from many ways, but the initial problem started from 1974, when the government started borrowing from private banks instead of our free interest rate Central Bank of Canada. From that point on, debt increased exponentially, and our economy experienced a dramatic downfall.
Now everything is like paper money. Now even not a paper money, it's a computer, it's just number.
Yeah.
So you can print as much as you want, and so everything is based on credit, and then everything is just like consume. And then when you consume too much and you're not producing enough, and then the difference is debt. Interest rate is so low, houses cost so much to buy one, you borrow the money. That's where all this debt come from.
And now Caroline has come to borrow some money.
Hi, how may I help you? Hi, I'd like to make a loan of $900. Okay, just to let you know that the interest rate will be 5% for 12 months. Okay? 5%? Yeah. Sure, I can handle that. Okay, Emma, you can handle it. Okay, here's your $900. Thank you. Thank you.
Caroline has used the $900 she has borrowed from the bank to purchase an axe. And using this axe, she has to work really hard in order to pay back the $900 she had borrowed.
Your supply of wood. Would you like to buy it for $945?
Alright.
Yes. Hi, how may I help you? Hey, I've got a $945. Thank you so much. Hey, here's a year's supply of branches. Would you like to buy them for $945? No, I don't have money. Why? But why? It's only $945. The bank only created $900. The $45 is extra. It never existed. But they charged me $45 in interest. That's none of my business. Bye. Hi, how may I help you? You see, the thing is, I cannot return the $945 because it was never created, and that's all I have. But that's like my
Lend the money to people who can afford it.
Yes.
And then when the houses prices go down, and they default it on the loans, and then all the houses basically give back to the banks. The student loans and auto loans.
One of the reasons actually is mortgage debt. So when you say get a house, get an education.
比如说人们要 lease 车，人们日常的消费是 credit card， 所以这个时候也会有一些 debt 在上面。
So you can't raise the tax, you can't cut the benefits, and the only one option means borrow money, print money. So make everybody happy.
debt to income ratio 最高的那个 level 应该是在 income 在前50%到75%这25%的人之间的，也就是说，对这部分人来说，他们是有一个相对稳定并且高的未来收入，所以在他们而言，欠钱并不是一个大问题，因为他们未来的收入会很高，而且很稳定，所以他们有足够的能力去 pay back。但是，在数据里面显示的是，收入最低的25%那一群人，他们的 debt to income ratio 是非常低的，因为这个时候他们没有能力去偿还这些债务，所以他们就不愿意去更多的借钱。有钱偿还的人他去借钱，没有钱偿还的人不去借钱，这个时候经济还是相对来说很 healthy。
From the mistakes our government has caused, severe consequences showed up and no one was able to solve.
Central banks and lower the rates. The economy printed lots of money trying to get out of the financial crisis. All this printed new money go to the stock market. They go to the asset prices like houses. Houses go up a lot, and then the stock market goes up a lot. So all the asset prices has a huge inflation. And consumer debt as a percentage of GDP is about 100%. When the rate going higher and higher, the interest you have to pay to service the debt is going to be higher and higher. And that is going to be a huge drag on the consumer, on the consumer side. Because as I said, you have to just service this, you have to pay interest. If you raise the rates enough, interest rate too high to borrow, and then they're going to borrow less. But the problem is then the economy is going to have a short-term, painful short-term correction. It's going to slow down enough and go into a recession. You already borrowed enough and nobody want to lend to you anymore because at a certain point, because there's so much debt, and then if you're an investor, you say, okay, why I want to lend you money? The interest is less than the inflation, the real return is negative, I'm not going to lend you to you. If you want to make a decent return, and then you have to, the interest rate has to be very, very high, and then it's going to choke off the economy.
Maybe if a lot of people have borrowed a lot of money, then they're going to be working very hard to repay those loans, and they won't be able to maybe focus on spending money on other things. So they borrow a lot of money in order to buy a house, but then they won't have money to take vacations, they won't have money to buy books for their children or things like this. So the idea is that because they have to pay so much money for the house, or because they have to pay so much money for their education, they're going to be poor for a lot longer than they otherwise would be. So that's a redistributional issue, an inequality issue. The other issue is that, yes, so if there is, sometimes in the economy you have a crisis, and when you have a crisis, a financial crisis is a situation, and yes, a lot of people don't repay their loans. So it's true that when more people have loans, and when people have their loans, it's more possible that we have a crisis where a lot of people don't repay their loans. People, if debt was down, then the government could print more money. It could be 5%, it could be 15%. It doesn't have to be 3%. It happens to be 3%. But the government still has control over the money supply, the total money supply, not just the 3%. Because the government could print more or they could print less. So the government still controls the total money supply.
Yeah.
The ability for private banks to create money out of thin air should be forbidden. Instead, the government should borrow from our Central Bank of Canada, where there is free interest rate, and spend the money circulation free from debt. According to the studies, the economists claim most debts are from mortgages, secondary mortgages, home equity line of credits, credit card, student loans, auto loans, and in-debt households. However, they barely mention the biggest factor, which is compounding interest. In 1974, the government gave the right to private corporations to print money out of thin air. Instead of borrowing from the Central Bank of Canada, where they have zero interest rates, they chose to borrow from private corporations, where there will be interest rate. And since the interest rate was never created, this will lead to where the debt come from.
Not much, to be honest. There's almost nothing you can do. Like with high debt, it's one of those things like, you don't get yourself into that situation, because if you are in it, there's very little we can do. So the Bank of Canada wants to raise interest rates.
Yeah.
Because like you said, low interest rates encourage people to borrow. High interest rates do the opposite. High interest rates encourage people to pay down their debt.
Yeah.
But for people who already have debt, if interest rates go too high too fast and they didn't think about that before they took out their loans, they might go bankrupt, and then you have problems. So Bank of Canada is trying to raise interest rates so slowly that nobody crashes along the way.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you do if you want people to drive slow in your street? Because maybe it's a residential neighborhood with lots of kids. You put up some speed bumps. But what if everybody is driving 100 and you're putting up some speed bumps like that? People will slow down, but along the way they might crash, especially if they're not looking at the road. Yeah. So I don't think there's very much we can do, to be honest. So just raise interest rates carefully and see what happens. And if you're, I don't want to be Stephen Poloz right now. I think the job he's doing as the governor of the Bank of Canada, governing monetary policy for Canada, is very difficult right now. But if that's you or me, I would tell you, all right, be very careful when you take out a big loan and read the fine print and make sure that if the interest rate goes up, even then you're going to be fine. Because there's...
For us to repay the debt, it means we got to change the way we live. Consumers, you have to think about how how much you make and how much you spend, and you got to think about what you really need. So you have to live you have to live based on your means. Just you find, hey, it's so easy to borrow money, and why not just keep borrowing? And who knows tomorrow? And I just want to live a good life today. Banks, they lend to their consumers as what called a prime rate. It's prime rate, and that's for lend to the the best consumers and the corporations, and the mortgage rates also turn to that, tied to that. When central bank raise the rates, and then the banks have to pay out more to investors to have to keep up with the higher rates, and the mortgage also go higher. Right now, the shape of the yield curve is kind of close to very flat. So that means the short-term yield are very close, not much different than the long-term. Flat meaning the market expect the central banks probably going to raise the later rate or maybe keep the rate.
We never know when our economy might collapse, and we don't know what kind of system will be enforced for our next economy. But what we know is we have done it right before 1974, and we sure can make our economy right again together as one.